Shia Islam includes most Muslims who are not considered Sunni Muslims. And this makes Shia Islam the second largest branch of Islam in the world. The Shia population around the world range between 320 million to 350 million worshippers. The followers believe only the caliph Ali and his descendants are the legitimate successors to the Prophet Muhammad. The Shia majority countries in the world are Iran, Iraq, Bahrain, Azerbaijan, Yemen, and also there's a larger Shia population in Syria as well as Turkey. Now let's get into more specific details about the Shia population around the world. In terms of the world Shia Muslim population, most people don't know that about half the population of the core Middle East are Shia Muslims. The nations where Shia Islam is dominant, as I mentioned, is Iran, which is at 95%, Azerbaijan is at 80%, Bahrain 75%, Iraq is 65%, and then we have Lebanon, that's at 45%. Also a large minority in Yemen at 45%. Turkey at 25%. Kuwait is at 35%. Afghanistan 20%. Pakistan is estimated 20 to 25%. Saudi Arabia sits at 15%. India is roughly 20 to 25% of Muslims. In the United Arab Emirates, it's at 20%. And Syria is 15 to 20%. And that's how the countries that have a large population of Shia Muslims break down by percentage. And as I mentioned, yes, Iran has a 95% majority of Shia Muslims. But did you know it wasn't always like that? Iran used to actually be a majority Sunni country. Iran was a Sunni majority up until the year 1500 when Shah Ismail I conquered Iran, and then he forced the conversion of Sunni Muslims to Shia Islam. The conversions continued for about 200 years, during which the number of Shia Muslims really increased. Now let's take a look at a little bit more facts involving the early history of Shia Islam. The Shias, also called the Shiites, were really a political party, and they supported Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was the fourth caliph, and later supported his descendants. This group of individuals continued to develop into a religious movement, which not only influenced Sunni Islam, but it also produced a number of important branches in which the term Shia is applied. Now, what are some of the practices and beliefs that make Shia Muslims distinct than other Muslims? One of the distinct principles of Shia Islam is the imamate. And this word is used in Shia theology. It comes from the word Imam, which means leadership. And this teaching includes the idea that successors of Muhammad are to be not just merely political leaders, but also they must be a spiritual leader. And this means that they really got to have an ability to interpret the inner mysteries and teachings of the Quran, as well as the Sharia. Shia Islam also consists of one school of thought, as well as some other minor schools of thoughts. The major school of thought is known as Jafariya, or the Twelvers. And there's some other minor school of thoughts like the Seveners as well as the Fivers. These titles refer to the number of imams that they recognize after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And the term Shia is often used synonymously with Twelvers. In Shia Islam, there are two important holy cities, and those are Al-Najaf as well as Karbala. And they're located in southern Iraq, as is the Great Mosque of Kufa. And this is a holy site where Ali, the fourth caliph, he lost his life in the 7th century. And the Great Mosque of Kufa was built in the 7th century, and it contains the remains of some very important people in Shia history. It also has the remains of Muslim bin Aqil, who is the first cousin of Imam Hussein bin Ali, as well as his companion Hani bin Ura and the revolutionary Muqtar al-Thaqafi. Over the years, the Great Mosque of Kufa has been redeveloped in various phases, and today it features a very elegant dome, as well as Safavid tile work from the 17th and 18th centuries. There are several sources that attribute the construction of the Great Mosque of Kufa in the middle of the 7th century to the caliph named Omar. Now, there are a few varying beliefs about the history of the mosque. Some believe that it was built on top of a temple constructed by Adam, who was the first man made by God, while others say that no, Adam didn't build it, but rather Adam's bones were buried on the site after they were carried by Noah into the ark. The site was identified in Shia Islam as a place where Noah built the ark.
According to the narrations of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, the mosque was first established by Adam when he was sent to this earth. Built and rebuilt, Nuh constructed his ark within its vicinity. where the waters that carried it began to flow.
So that's another striking similarity between the religions of Christianity and Islam. Now I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about nikah muta. What's this all about?
Sometimes it is better to go into a halal, blessed relationship under a multi-marriage contract. A multi-marriage will terminate after a specified time.
Nikah muta literally means pleasure marriage, and it's a private, verbal, temporary marriage contract that's practiced in Shia Islam. And this is a type of marriage that's done in the exact same way as a permanent marriage in order to make a man and a woman halal or permissible by law to each other. However, a nikah muta is temporary and it ends at a fixed period of time. According to Shia Muslims, to enter into this marriage, the bride of course cannot be married to anyone else. She also has to be a Muslim or belong to all al-Kitab, which means the people of the book, and this extends to Jews, Christians, as well as others that follow the teachings of a divine book.
I accepted the marriage when I saw his pictures and realised this was my fate. I'm very happy and satisfied.
She also must be celibate, as well as she cannot be young, and this is only if her father isn't there and cannot give consent. At the end of this contract, of course, the marriage ends and the wife needs to undergo Ida, and this is a period of abstinence from marriage as well as sleeping with other men. And Ida is done so that it's very clear who the father of the child or children is in case the wife got pregnant during the temporary marriage. Another interesting fact about Shia Islam is that the followers are allowed to worship at graves. Shias are totally okay with this practice and they encourage it. They believe that even though other Shias may have passed away, they're still of the way of Allah. And they consider it the same as asking anyone, whether they're living or dead, to pray for you. Now, most of us, whether you're a Muslim or not, have heard the term 5 pillars of Islam. Well, in Shia Islam, they're conveyed a lot differently than in Sunni Islam. For Shias, the 5 pillars, or more accurately translated as the principles of religion, are considered the 5 fundamental principles of Islam, and Shia Muslims consider the 5 Sunni pillars to be merely the most important obligations, rather than these being the 5 pillars of Islam. The 5 principles of religion for Shias are Tawheed, which is the oneness of God. There is Adl, the justice of God. Nubuwah, which means prophethood. Imama, which is the leader of mankind. And Mi'ad, the resurrection. Here are some of the most common misconceptions, misunderstandings, and in some cases straight up lies about Shia Islam. At number 10, Shias don't pray to God. Yeah, there's a lot of other Muslims who believe that Shia Muslims do not pray to God at all. And instead, they pray to Imam Ali or Imam Hussein, or not pray to any deity at all. Now, this is a false belief, and the main belief of all Muslims is the belief in one God, or Allah in Arabic, and God alone. Shia Muslims also believe in one God, and they love God just as much as any other Muslim. Shias have a different Quran. Now, this is a very popular lie, and it's often cleared up pretty easily, but nevertheless, the misconception does still exist. Shias believe that there is only one Quran, and one of the miracles of the religion of Islam is that the Quran was preserved in the original form. It's believed that the Quran now is the original Quran recited by the Prophet Muhammad, and all Shias read the same exact Quran. Next up at number 8, Shias don't pray 5 times a day. Now, this is one of the most common misconceptions and lies. The 5 daily prayers that all Muslims perform are required to be done. And Shia Muslims, they pray 5 times a day. The only difference is the timings of the prayer. Shias pray the 5 prayers, but they split them up into 3 times a day. And now the reason for this is because the Quran only mentions 3 times of prayer during the day. Also, Sunni Muslim scholars agree that the Quran mentions only 3 times for prayer. However, they keep to praying 5 times a day based on hadith. But there are many Shia Muslims who actually pray 5 times a day, like Sunni Muslims. Alright, next lie to clear up is that Shias pray to a rock. This lie comes from Shia Muslims praying on a torba, which is a round piece of hard clay that your forehead touches during prostration while you're praying. But Shia Muslims, they do not pray to the rock. The Shia belief is that while prostrating in prayer, their foreheads must touch natural earth and not something artificial. This is done to follow what the Prophet Muhammad did during his prayer. There are several hadiths that state that the Prophet Muhammad lifted his head from prayer and the mark on the earth could still be seen where his forehead was, like the hadith found in Bukhari. And it says, and I quote, "The Messenger of Allah said, 'The earth has been made for me a place of prostration and a means of purification. So wherever a man of my ummah is, when the time of prayer comes, let him pray.'" Moving on to number 6, Shias don't love Prophet Muhammad. Ooh, okay. So Shias are often believed to only love Imam Ali and Imam Hussein. It is true that Shias love Imam Ali because of his role in preserving Islam as well as other qualities that he had, and they also love Imam Hussein and many other devout companions and family members of the Prophet Muhammad because of their devotion to their religion. Now there's a passage in the Quran, specifically in Surah 42 verses 23, that Shias base their belief on, and it goes as follows: "That is of which Allah gives the good news to his servants, to those who believe and do good deeds. Say, O Muhammad, I do not ask of you any reward for it, but love for my near relatives. And whoever earns good, we give him more of good therein. Surely Allah is forgiving, grateful." Now, halfway into number 5, Shias focus too much on Imam Hussein. This is another big lie. Imam Hussein was the Prophet Muhammad's grandson, and Shia Muslims remember his martyrdom. Imam Hussein's family, as well as other members of Prophet Muhammad's family, were chained and dragged and held as prisoners, and both Shia and Sunni Muslims remember his death during the month of Muharram, and the pilgrimage to his shrine in Karbala attracts many people each year. So it's not only Shia Muslims who make this pilgrimage for what is known as Ashura, but Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists, Hindus, as well as other Sunni Muslims, they commemorate his life and his stand against injustice by paying homage to his grave in Karbala. Alright, the lie number 4 is Shias don't use the hadith. But the thing is, how to pray in and of itself is completely based on hadith for both Sunni and Shia. So the misconception that all Shias don't use a hadith or use hadith that are unreliable is just straight up not true. Many hadiths are taken from Ahlul al-Bayt, with many famous Sunni scholars agreeing on the importance of the Quran and Ahlul al-Bayt. Now, next up at number 3, Shia Muslims hate Sunni Muslims. No. Not true. Shia Muslims do not hate Sunni Muslims or any other non-Shia Muslim. Regardless, Shias and Sunnis, they are all Muslims who believe in Allah and love the Prophet Muhammad and all other prophets. Although there are differences, they all pray in the same direction, they pray the same amount of times, and they pray to the same God with the same amount of love for their religion. But unfortunately, extremists on both sides, they fuel this division and hatred towards each other. But there are actually many countries where Shia and Sunni Muslims live together in peace, such as countries like Iraq, Lebanon, Iran, Syria, as well as others. You'll also even find Sunni and Shia marriages. Number 2 brings us this lie: all Shias are from Iran or support Iran. Now, we got to clear up for sure that not all Shia Muslims are Iranian or support the Iranian government. But yes, the majority of Iranians are Shia Muslims. However, the majority of Shia are not Iranian. There are Shia that live in countries like Saudi Arabia and Lebanon, Iraq, Morocco, Nigeria, South Africa, Pakistan and India, Turkey, Malaysia, Indonesia. The list goes on. So definitely you'll find Shia Muslims on every continent. And the final lie we got to clear up in this episode is the belief that Imams are infallible. Well, this is actually not true. All prophets are born prophets, but as mentioned in the Quran about Abraham, that after passing the test, a prophet becomes a leader or imam. And imams are carriers of the message of Islam. Shias consider Ali only as an imam, but they consider Muhammad as the prophet or Nabi, as well as a messenger or Rasul, and a leader or imam. So yes, imam is just one title, but no, they love and respect Prophet Muhammad, and an imam doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is a prophet and completely infallible. At number 10, we have salat. Shias do this a little bit different from the Sunni Muslims. When bowing in prayer, also known as sujood, a Shia Muslim will rest their head on a wooden or clay tablet. Then wudu or washing is also considered to be a part of the prayers, and it's not just preparation. Prayer is to help eliminate sin, to worship Allah, and to remind Shia Muslims about their insignificance in relationship to Allah or God. Also, being humble and extremely disciplined about prayer is very important for Shia Muslims. Now, number 9 brings us Psalm. For Shia Muslims, Psalm or fasting has two main purposes. First, it's to give practical help to the poor, as Shia Muslims will understand how the poor and hungry really feel. And the second thing is that fasting will help Shia Muslims become stronger at rejecting evil and doing good. The next practice at number 8 is zakat. The first Imam, Ali, stated that the purpose of zakat is to test the rich and to provide for the poor. And if all the people paid their zakat, then no one on the planet would be poor. So that's why Shias are very specific on what zakat can be paid on. It can be paid on silver or gold coins. It can be paid on cows, sheep, goats, and camels, as well as wheat, barley, dates, and raisins. And such a specific approach to zakat has made it more complicated for Shia Muslims to actually calculate in the modern world. There's another form of giving which I'll get to later on in this episode, but real quick, let's move on to number 7, Hajj. Very similar to Sunni Muslims, this pilgrimage brings Shia Muslims closer to Allah and encourages them to examine their behavior so that they can then be better prepared for the Day of Judgment. Also, Shias believe that the 12 Imams spoke regularly of the importance of performing Hajj. The practice at number 6 is jihad. Jihad is one of the 10 obligatory acts of Shia Islam, but it's also very important to all Muslims, regardless of what branch you fall under. It's been reported in the Hadith that the Prophet Muhammad said these following words: "The person who struggles so that Allah's word is supreme is the one serving Allah's cause." Now, the word jihad means to struggle or make an effort. And the word is often used incorrectly in the media, which simply refers to jihad as being some sort of violent attack against Western civilizations. But jihad can be divided into two general categories. There's the greater jihad, which is the inner struggle to live good and to follow all the pillars of the faith of Islam. And then there's a lesser jihad, which can have a violent or military aspect, and it may be referred to as holy war, although that's not necessarily an accurate translation. However, this type of force can only be used in certain conditions. And those conditions are, for the first and foremost, is defending Allah, as well as to gain freedom from oppression and restore peace in the land. Also, jihad is fought until the enemy lays down their weapons. That is a condition. If they surrender, you can't keep on going. Now, women and children should not be harmed in the process, as well as prisoners should be treated well. So if those conditions are met, then the lesser jihad can be performed. Halfway in at number 5, we have the khums. This is a tax that is unique to Shia Muslims, and it's a 20% tax on their annual income. It should be split in 6 different ways: Allah, Muhammad, relatives of Muhammad, orphans, the needy, and anyone who is away from home and has no money to return. Now, a Muslim cannot pay khums directly to Allah. So what was done initially was that this portion was given to Muhammad and then to his relatives, as well as the first 11 Imams. And it's now paid to the Shia religious leaders and spent accordingly. Now, the practice at number 4 is Amr bil Maruf. The word Maruf means anything that is considered acceptable according to Islamic Sharia law. In simple terms, this may mean carrying out your obligations of your religion or eating halal foods and various other things that are good. However, a Shia Muslim has a responsibility to promote good and, if possible, try to intervene against injustices like stopping bullying or, even campaigning for human rights. The practice at number 3 is Nahi Anil Munkar. Now this refers to forbidding whatever is evil. Shia Muslims should avoid things which are considered haram or forbidden and stand up against evil in the world, kind of like the previous point. Tawalla comes in at number 2. Now this means acting with love towards fellow Muslims and also loving things that are good. Some Shias would see this obligation as towards all Muslims, whereas others may reject associating with Sunni Muslims because they see them as being on a different path. But nevertheless, although there are various interpretations about that, the general obligation is that you should show love towards a fellow Muslim, as well as show love towards things that are good. And we end this episode off at number 1. We have Tabara, and this is hatred towards those who oppose Allah. And this perhaps is probably the most controversial of all the practices on this list because it's left a lot up to interpretation, and a lot of Muslims often view this as being at the heart of the divisions that happen within Islam. It can be traced back to the original Sunni and Shia split, where some Muslims believe that the leaders after Muhammad should be elected, which has then become the Sunni majority, while others believe that the next leader should be related to Muhammad, which led to the Shia minority. Shia Muslims believe that they have been treated very badly since the split, and some Shias reject any ties to Sunni Muslims, and this division has often led to bloodshed in the world. But either way, just like the other obligations that call Shia Muslims to stand up for good, those who oppose Allah can also be campaigned against. So this is not necessarily meaning that there needs to be bloodshed when it comes to their hatred for people who oppose Allah. There's so many different ways that you can oppose somebody. Shia, also known as Shia Islam, encompasses most Muslims who are not considered Sunni Muslims, which makes Shia Islam the second largest branch of Islam. Followers believe that the only caliph Ali and his descendants are the legitimate successors to the Prophet Muhammad, and they reject the first 3 caliphs. The Shia population range between 320 million to 350 million worldwide. Now let's get into more specific details about the Shia population around the world. So the Shia majority countries are Iran, Iraq, Bahrain, Azerbaijan, Yemen, and also there's a larger Shia population in Syria and Turkey. In terms of the rest of the world, the Shia Muslim population makes up about half the population of the core Middle East. Now the nations where Shia Muslim form a considerable portion are, like I mentioned, Iran at 95%, Azerbaijan at 80%, Bahrain 75%, Iraq 65%, Lebanon 45%, also Yemen's 45%, Turkey 25%. They make up 35% of Kuwait. Afghanistan is just totaling at 20%. Pakistan, it ranges from 20 to 25%. Saudi Arabia, a little bit less at 15%. India, they make up 20 to 25%. And in the United Arab Emirates, they make up 20%, and about 15 to 20% for Syria. Now, as I mentioned, in Iran, Shia Muslims make up the majority with 95% of the Muslim population in the country. But before that, Iran was a Sunni majority country until 1500, when Shah Ismail I conquered Iran and forced a conversion of Sunni Muslims to Shia Islam. The conversion continued for about 200 years, during which the number of Shia Muslims increased dramatically. Now, the distinct principles and institution of Shia Islam is the imamate. That word right there is used in Shia theology. It derives from the word imam, and that means leadership. And this teaching includes the idea that the successor of Muhammad is more than merely just a political leader. The imam must also be a spiritual leader, which means that he must have the ability to interpret the inner mysteries of the Quran and Sharia law. Shia Islam also consists of one majority school of thought, and that's known as the Jafariya or the Twelvers, and a few minor schools of thoughts are there as well, like the Seveners, the Fivers, and these names all refer to the number of imams that they recognize after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. The term Shia, however, is sometimes synonymously used with Jafariya Twelvers, but the term can also be applied to other schools of thought in the branch. Now, in terms of prayer, why do Shias prostrate themselves on the earth? Well, the Messenger of Allah used to pray on a kumra, which is a palm leaf mat large enough to place your face on while in prostration. The Prophet declared that the best place for prostration was the earth or upon something that grows from the earth. Also, Shia Islam has two of the most important holy cities, Al-Najaf and Karbala, which are located in southern Iraq, as is the Great Mosque of Kufa. And this is sanctified as a site where Ali, the fourth caliph, lost his life in the 7th century. The Great Mosque of Kufa was built in the 7th century, and it contains the remains of some of the very important people in Shia history. It has remains of Muslim ibn Aqil, who was the first cousin of Imam Hussein ibn Ali, his companion and Hani ibn Urwa, and the revolutionary Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Now, the Great Mosque has been redeveloped in various phases over the years, and today it features a great elegant golden dome and Safavid tile work from the 17th and 18th centuries. Several sources attribute the construction of the Great Mosque of Kufa in the middle of the 7th century to the Caliph Omar. There are a few varying beliefs about the history of the mosque. Some believe that it was built on top of the temple constructed by Adam, the first man to ever live, while others say nope, Adam didn't build it, rather Adam's bones were buried on the site after they were carried by Noah into the ark. The site was identified in Shia Islam as a place where Noah built the ark. Now, another pretty interesting fact is nikah muta. That phrase right there literally means pleasure marriage, and this is a private and verbal temporary marriage contract that is practiced in 12-verse Shia Islam. This type of marriage is conducted in the same way as a permanent marriage in order to make a man and woman physically halal or permissible or lawful in traditional Islamic law. However, a nikah muta is a temporary marriage that ends at a fixed period of time. Now, according to Shia Islamic law, to enter into this marriage, the bride must not be married, she must be a Muslim or belong to Al-Kitab, which are the people of the book, which extends to Christians and Jews as well as others who follow the teachings of certain divine books like the Bible, Quran, and she should be celibate, and she should not be young, only if her father is not there and cannot give consent. Now, at the end of the contract, the marriage ends and the wife must undergo iddah, which is a period of abstinence from the marriage and sleeping with another man. So iddah is done so that it would be clear who the father of the child or children is in the case of the wife becoming pregnant during the temporary marriage. And the final thing I want to share is for Shia Islam, the 5 pillars, or more correctly translated as the 5 principles of the religion. There are 5 fundamental principles of Islam, no more or no less. The Shia branch considers the Sunni 5 pillars to be merely the most important obligations rather than them being the 5 pillars of Islam. So it's a little bit tricky, but the 5 pillars according to Shias are the oneness of God, which is Tawhid, the justice of God, the Adl, prophethood, which is Nubuwah, leadership of mankind, that's Imama, and resurrection is Mi'ad.